Well, thanks so much for joining us this morning, Terry and all of you. Pharma's leading patient and caregiver advocacy program is called Voters for Cures.
Right.
And Voters for Cures' mission is really simple, right? To support policies that help get new, innovative medicines into the hands of patients. Pretty straightforward. And today I'm excited to hear from you, Terry. You're a colon cancer survivor. You've been a leading voice from the Voters for Cures organization and really a longtime advocate of medical research and treatment development. You have been really gracious to share your story, certainly with us and with researchers, countless lawmakers, and other patient advocates. So your journey hasn't been easy, but it certainly is a really important and meaningful place to start our discussion here today. So if you don't mind, I'd love to start our conversation with just a little bit about your medical journey, sort of how you learned about your diagnosis and sort of what your day-to-day looks like today.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here, and especially since so many of you showed up. 15 minutes ago, this room was about empty, so now we're really on it. I was sailing along, happily married, 4 kids, and worked for the gas company in Cleveland, and I was an executive health program. Went in for my normal checkup, and at age 40, they said, "You got a problem." I had colon cancer, and it was stage 3. Within 4 or 5 years, I would not be here anymore. And at the time, they put a zipper in me from top to bottom and got it out. And God bless America, I was cured, and I've had to do colonoscopies every 3 years. But that kind of woke me up, as you would imagine. Not only the stress it put on my then wife and my kids, but it made me realize this is real. Since then, I, in the last 10, 12 years, developed type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure. I think I've always had high blood pressure. But it has been the course of my situation that has caused me to just say, this is enough. I've got to do something. And not only did I work it out with my medical staff, and that's through the Cleveland Clinic, and they're world class, trust me. But it made me decide I needed to do more, and I found Voters for Cures, and it's a wonderful organization, and it gives me a chance to, frankly, shout off my mouth whenever someone wants to hear something, because these changes happen quickly, and each one of us has a history of healthcare concerns that need to be addressed, and I do what I can to help.
Well, Terry, we're happy to give you a place to let your thoughts fly. Thanks for sharing that. And you touch on a couple of things that I think are really relevant to this conversation. One is chronic disease, right? 3 in 5 Americans are suffering from some kind of chronic disease. We spend 90% of our healthcare dollars on Americans with chronic disease, but it's not all doom and gloom, right? Better prevention and treatment of chronic disease could save upwards of $500 billion annually. And this is a place where certainly we see a lot of value from biopharmaceutical intervention. So when you think about diabetes, for example, data shows in the Medicare program when diabetics are adherent to their medicines, we save $4,000 over the course of a couple of years per Medicare Benny. That adds up. Yeah. Right, pretty quickly, and whether it's obesity or cardiovascular disease or diabetes, we've seen really great advances. So there's a lot of promise in the chronic disease space. The same could be said for cancer, right? When you look at breast cancer, for example, the death rate has been cut in half since 1975. Let's think about that, and 75% roughly of that advance is attributable to biopharmaceuticals, right? And we're studying more assets than ever in the cancer space. And I think that's why you often hear from our industry that we need to be really mindful of the policy and regulatory environment to ensure that it can support future innovation. So given your healthcare story, your cancer diagnosis, but also sort of how you're managing chronic disease today. How do you think about drug discovery, right? Why is that important, not just for you, but for all of us sitting here in the room?
Well, thank you. Much more important for you is what drug discovery does. And it gives you and sometimes even just clinical trials give a customer the benefit of what drug development can be. For me, it was when I look back age 40 and what the prognosis was. I'm now at age 68. Yeah, I get a colonoscopy every 3 years, sail through it. It's great. With what I've been through to live the life I do, which is basically how I want, when I want, and if I want, it's all mostly due to the drug discovery. They keep getting better. They keep giving everybody a chance to do better. But it's up to the patient to pay attention, make some decisions. You've got to make some decisions because the doctors, I think their scope is a little further. They're got to be pretty narrow in their recommendations to you. You need a responsibility to look into this kind of stuff and decide what's going to be best for you. And when it's not, and I've done this, and I encourage everybody, if you think it's not, let the doctor know, change to another med, drop a med for a little while, be more active, be as active as you can be in taking advantage of the two-way conversation.
Yeah, and you've talked a lot about sort of the doctor-patient relationship, and I think there are a spectrum of policies being debated right now that a lot of people are concerned about in terms of how those policies could affect sort of that doctor-patient relationship, the environment that drug discovery is really operating in. So you kind of have a spectrum, right? On one hand, a couple of weeks ago, we heard President Biden talk about the cancer moonshot, which certainly gives patients, like yourself many years ago, hope, right? Folks who are waiting for a cure. On the other hand, we really see sort of the core pillars of the innovation ecosystem being threatened, right? From a policy and reimbursement perspective, a coverage and reimbursement perspective, we need to make sure that FDA-approved medicines get to patients. We've seen some challenges in the Alzheimer's space, for example, in that regard. Meanwhile, sort of the gold standard of the Food and Drug Administration, the FDA, is being undermined by things like potential importation, right? Bringing drugs into the country that aren't really subjected to the same standards that we have. And then, really fundamental to the drug discovery ecosystem is intellectual property, right? And we see that in jeopardy because of potential policies like March-in, where patents would legitimately be seized, but also because of the Inflation Reduction Act, right? Which really undermines the biopharmaceutical life cycle in some ways, and in some cases, price sets medicines after they've been on the market for only a few years, right? And we haven't talked about the Inflation Reduction Act or the IRA today. We haven't talked about price setting, which is really this fundamental shift in our drug discovery ecosystem. Talk to me a little bit about kind of your thoughts about how that policy could impact what patients experience over time.
First off, you notice she has notes to get through all this, but she knows it all. If it's that complicated, then how are each one of us, or even those who are not in the research industry, supposed to do it? It's a tough assignment. It's required, though, because of how complicated it can be today with IRAs, and everybody thinks, my IRA.
The acronym soup is real, right? And it's
very
scary.
Good. Yeah. The pharmaceutical industry has grown. It's a hugely complex industry, but each one of us, and by each one of us, I mean not only these in this room, but patients out there need to really keep track of this. It's difficult if they've got someone they can divide it up with, but it's a complex industry. The benefit is that they have found more medicines that are better for us. They continue to want to, but these barriers are being put up by a variety of people, a variety of groups that kind of make us wonder, what are they trying to get across? So each individual customer needs to pay attention, needs to then be vocal as to what they think is best, talk to their doctor, talk to the local pharmaceuticals, talk to the media if need be. Letters to the editors can be a great rallying cry to help keep this on track, because if you don't, we're going to be handed a lot of this stuff, and I'm not sure that it's best for us.
Yeah. And, Terry, again, you've talked about, how you have spent time with your doctor sort of figuring out the right treatment. Is that fair?
I talk to my doctor's office 4, 5, 6 times a year. I have in the past adjusted my medications, and she's, let me back up, more in her shoes. She had to kind of get used to me, what I was, but the more I've worked with her, and it's been a 20-year relationship, she now trusts me that what I do is what I want to do, and if it doesn't work, I'm going to be the first to say. So we have a real good one-on-one relationship. I think all patients should. I know it's going to vary a certain extent, but I think telling her what my feelings are about different pharmaceuticals, what I can try, what I won't try, makes sense.
Yeah, and I think this is one of the places sort of going back to the alphabet soup of the IRA, where people are really disheartened, right? You talk about sort of working with your physician to decide what treatment is right for you. And for many people, that lands them in a place where they're taking what we would call a small molecule drug, right? Which historically has been a pill.
Yes.
And one of the things about the IRA is that it price sets medicines that are small molecule faster than other medicines, right? And you kind of take a step back and, to your point, this is a complex environment with companies and investors, and you sort of say, what kind of impact, could that have? And I think what concerns myself and others certainly is that, people are going to make different investment decisions over time. And, small molecule medicines are where we get the majority of our cancer treatments, certainly our treatment for chronic disease, and also where we see a lot of promise for unmet need in places like mental health.
Yeah.
So this is one of these areas where policy really matters and could have, really devastating impact for patients over time. I could go on and on about this topic, but I see we only have a few minutes left. So what we haven't talked about today is access, right? We've talked a lot about all of the innovation, which has certainly been incredible, especially over the past few years. But we haven't talked about how innovation actually gets to patients. And one of the kind of hot topics around access is the role of pharmacy benefit managers, or PBMs, new acronym, right? And sort of the role they play in how much patients pay out of pocket for medicines, and also kind of the various hoops that patients may have to jump through when they're trying to access the medication prescribed by their doctor. So curious sort of if you have any thoughts about sort of the PBM ecosystem.
I wish it would end. It didn't get any traction last year's Congress. There's a lot of issues they're dealing with, some well, many not very well. But PBMs are one that needs to get addressed this session, and don't treat customers like me, and I'm assuming everybody else, as they should. There's a story in yesterday's New York Times, I don't know if anybody saw it, I think it was front page, a story about Ohio Governor Mike DeWine, who, I can't remember the name of the company, and I don't want to take a chance and mispronounce it or mislabel it and get in trouble.
Smart man.
It was about a PBM that was headquartered somewhere in the South, a huge company. This was more a story on how all the lawyers got involved, but it was an example of a PBM that's sucking millions and millions and millions of dollars, frankly, out of my pocket, to give their views on what should be charged for drugs. It's simple as that, and I think it's awful, and I wish Congress would get involved. They need to get it addressed. They need to get it eliminated. I don't think PBMs have a role in today's pharma policies, but they have enough support, and you can kind of get from the workings of PBMs that they aren't the best. You don't hear about them. They are a fraction of what our cost is, and it's too bad.
Yeah, the market isn't working.
No.
Right, I think that's safe to say, and it is certainly time for Congress to do a couple of things, right? One, de-link PBM compensation from the list price of a drug. I am not an economist, full stop, right? But I do think that it's obvious to most of us without economic training that having PBM really benefit from higher list prices. That doesn't feel like a recipe for a well-functioning market, right?
And you don't hear about them. That's what bothers me the most. They aren't called out in the pricing.
Yeah.
They aren't called out in discussions with your doctors. They need to be called out, and I don't think they're working. They need to step back.
And they're not sharing the savings.
No, they aren't. No,
right?
no,
So
they're not.
PBMs negotiate rebates, discounts with manufacturers.
Yep.
And then patients go to the pharmacy counter and they're not benefiting
Nope.
from those savings. And it feels silly to hire somebody to negotiate on your behalf if they're not going to share the fruits of their negotiation.
And if you don't know about them, yeah.
Right?
Yes,
So,
exactly.
well, we're just about at time, but I want to give you one more chance to sort of talk about maybe why you're here today or what we didn't talk about in our 20 minutes together that we should raise for everyone.
Well, thank you again for coming. Thank you for having me, and appreciate all your homework.
Yeah.
What I mostly want to say is thank you for not only being here, but for what you do every day in your jobs. I know there's a variety of backgrounds here, but there's some way or reason each one of you touch the pharmaceutical business. It is phenomenal that it is so successful now versus where it was 30 years ago when I had my cancer scare. So keep doing what you're doing. What you do every day helps cancer patients in particular, all patients, but cancer patients, lead a better life. And they get to lead the kind of life that gives them hope for the future. Their families can take advantage of it. And so on behalf of all of them, thank you very much. It's a big thing you do, and I hope you hear that often.
Terry, thank you for being here today. I think I speak for everyone when I say you are a reminder about why we all do what we do. And so thanks for taking the time, and thanks to everyone for having us.
Thank you.
Views expressed in this podcast are those of individuals being interviewed and do not reflect any company, parent company, or affiliates they represent.